Hello there, friends. Yes, let me try and get to a point, really. Something I try and portray that I find it really frustrating. From my own personal view, nothing serious. It's just sometimes when I try and portray a particular aspect, it becomes very, very difficult. It's about context. Like if I say something to you, then how do you receive that? And I like say if I said, oh, you're an idiot, do you receive that as a friendly kind of humouring way, or is it ironic? Is it artistic? Is it scripted? Is it a law, If I was to say I am the best, I am the best, then do you say you are the best, or do you say I am the best? It's like, do you translate the words that someone else says, All say I, you, everybody says you. I think you get the idea. Reflections. Mirrors are a good example, but let's take the surface of water. We see the reflection in the sky, especially in a lake. We see a reflection in the sky, and the trees and everything, a perfect reflection. It's a mirror image. And other than it being upside down, the world doesn't look much different. Same as this image here of nature. Anything you can see, rocks, waterfalls, animals, plants, trees, birds, insects, if you was to look at that in the mirror, it all looks kind of the same. Obviously your friends, suddenly you've got like something that's different about your face or whatever that's recognisable, but things stay the same. But there's one world that does not stay the same, and that is the world of communication. Take the written word. If I was to write my name, I'd have to write it in the mirror. So if I write it now, Steve, it's the wrong way round. So I'd have to write it like that to make it the right way round. So I see my name from this side in the mirror, and you see it then from your side as Steve. So if you imagine then you're looking at a world and you put it in the mirror, the actual natural things in life stay the same, but logos, words, numbers, letters, names, symbols, all of these things to do with the realm of communication are in reverse. In a way, we can also reverse words, like spoken words, backwards and forwards. So in a way, to reveal that other world, we just look at it in the mirror and see what has changed. So that world of reflection is very much connected with the things that we read, and the things that determine our lives, like legislation, laws, holy scriptures, all written things seem to have a great deal of power over us. And as we use the language in such an ambiguous kind of loose way and just use words in all kinds of contexts, it's really, really important to understand the context of a particular piece of legislation or document or writing. If you get a letter through your letterbox, be the letterbox of your mind or the letterbox of your house, that crack of doom, when you find an envelope in there and you open it, it could be just spam, it could be like just some advertising junk mail, or it could be from a wonderful friend or lover, it could be from some book club or something, or it could be from a government or from somebody wanting money. And each time you have to understand the context of that letter in order to be able to interpret it. You get a letter in the thing, you have won $1 million, and then you open it up. You can't take that literally, you have won $1 million, But then at the same time, when you get an important letter that's like got a government seal on it, a state seal, or some very authentic, authoritarian document, then it's got a different context. You suddenly feel it in your stomach. You suddenly feel like your person, your legal person, your name and everything is being used, is kind of being spoken to, being addressed, and you've got no choice but to step into your person and respond. And so it's this idea of being in person that has captivated my interest over the recent years. Starting with law. I and many of us, we want to determine our lives. We want to be free from something hanging over our heads telling us what we can and cannot do. Obviously, as a society, we need to live safely together, not harm each other. But at the same time, we don't need this kind of nanny state over our heads. And most often, we expand spiritually and mentally and consciously as human beings, but and grow and become, kind of proud of ourselves for what we've achieved. But then when we confront the political system, the social system at large, it treats us as the same. It treats us like wards of the state. It treats us like we have no spiritual side to us, no perspective, And life is about perception, and as we grow older and our consciousness grows, our perception gets bigger and bigger of the world, and we see things in a different way, and that changes our reality. But when it comes to this government legislation that comes in to our lives, then it seems that we don't have a perspective anymore, a perception anymore. It's the government's perception. It's the law is the law because we say so. The law is the law. That's basically the answer. You have to follow the law because it's the law. Well, why is it the law? Because it's the law. And so these are questions that started annoying me. Why do I have to jump into my legal personage to respond to business that I didn't invoke? Why should I respond to a claim that has nothing to do with my life? Why should I put time and energy into defending myself from a legal attack? And also, what's the best response to such a thing? At the end of the day, if somebody's sending me an envelope with a legal document inside, it's still only paper. So I still can't presume that is a physical attack on me as a man, or on my person. The idea of having persons is to make a puppet, to make a straw man that can be accused of things, and that accusation can be then released later. But to actually accuse a man directly, So there's a fictional realm being built up called law, and it is fiction. I don't mean it's fantasy in that way, and fiction doesn't mean to say it doesn't exist. It just means that it's figurative. It's based on comparisons and associations with the real world. There's a lot of things that we can't explain in words. We'd need new words for those things, like in the legal system. So the whole realm of words, including the legal realm and other languages and all of this language madness, is become very, very overwhelming, very complicated for people, and we get in and out of context. So take two books. I often use this as an example. Let's take Lord of the Rings and the Bible, the Holy Scriptures. First of all, the word Bible means library, basically, or collection of books. Lord of the Rings is a fantasy novel, I think it would be defined as. It's a work of fiction, and the Bible is a work of, this is to be disputed. But if we were arguing about, say, Sauron from Lord of the Rings, the Dark Lord on the Dark Throne, the one who's trying to win Middle-earth, the enemy. In a conversation, I'd never be arguing with somebody about whether Sauron exists or doesn't exist. Not in a normal argument. If we was talking about Lord of the Rings, or even just talking. We was talking about Sauron. We wouldn't get into a discussion about whether Sauron exists or does not exist, because it's not relevant to the context that we're talking about. We're talking fictionally, figuratively, as Sauron as a literal device, a character in a book that plays a role, a function to the story at large, to develop our understanding and reasoning of the world. So Sauron is a literal device. In essence, my personage to the world is a device, a literal device, because it runs off the things that I'm saying right now. But in a literal sense, Sauron is a character in a book. And that doesn't mean to say that if Sauron really existed or doesn't exist, that it would be any more significant or insignificant. It's just, in the context of a book, it's a character. So we would both have that understanding and be talking about Sauron and his person and how Sauron is and what he's doing and what he's, although we know he doesn't exist, only in the mind of and intent of the author. Now we take the Bible, and I can't say that it exists or didn't exist. There's a lot of people saying, this really exists and this can be found, but for sure, if you was to look into Lord of the Rings, you could find maybe a sword that would, I'm not trying to defile the two books, but now if we're taking like the Bible and we're arguing about the character God, or the figure God, or whatever, then before we even begin, there's a massive argument about whether God exists or doesn't exist, or whether you or I believe in God or don't believe in God, and all of these things, and then what is God, and is it a deity or a theity, or is it a force in energy? Are we all talking about the same thing but got different words for it? After all, the word God in different languages is also spelt different, so therefore it can't be a name. So obviously this word God is it's a title for a character. And that character is a literary device. It only works in the context of that whole book as a whole. If you took half of Lord of the Rings away, there'd be a lot of sense missing from Sauron. Same as if you took certain parts of the Bible away, there'd be the sense of, like, the character God would be missing. But whether God actually exists or not is not the debate that's necessary in order to read a book. The necessary thing is to find your own impersonation, to impersonate those characters in your own mind, to give them personage in your own mind. So when you're reading a story, you bring those characters to life. The same in Lord of the Rings, just the same as in the Bible, as in any book. You would read the characters, you would learn their character traits, you would learn about those characters and their intentions, and you would find yourself, giving them spirit, giving them life. Those characters are just fictional characters by the author in Lord of the Rings. When we're talking about the Bible or Jesus, and we're saying, yeah, Jesus really lived, well, it gets into a very complicated argument, because it's then, is he now dead? How long does he live? Or is he always dead? Or is he eternally alive? We have to start taking out of this normal realm and think, well, let's forget the things that happen here. Let's put it back into the storyline and see what it means inside of the story. It's very difficult for me to describe. From my own experience, my mind works on computer programming, and any of you know that you who program computers, you've got like this kind of logic, and I don't think everybody's naturally got that. Everybody's got a different skill, so maybe it's a particular skill that certain people have. Have this kind of logical way of putting things down. So computer language, where can I take it? In the 80s, you used to get these computer games, like they were, because computers were not very powerful. It'd be like a text game, which means you'd start the computer and it'd say, you are in a dark room, there is a door to the north and there is a box. and you would say go north, and it would say the door is locked, and you'd say open the box, there is a key in the box, get the key, unlock the door is now unlocked, you are in a garden. And so the game would go on, and the computer would, the programming of the computer, the software was programmed to make you feel like you was in a world, and it was responding to you through simple text. Now a game like that has to kind of impersonate life. It has to impersonate the things that the user, the one who's actually going to play through the game, is going to have to impersonate what you're going to do. So, within the limits of the game. For me, I see the system very much like this game. The paper system, the mirror world, this reflection world, is very much like this computer game. But how can a computer game be played through without the computer, without the machine? For starters, our mind is like the hardware, it's like the computer. And your attention is like you, the user. So when you're sat at your computer, like maybe now, the computer is like your mind, your memory. It probably even has a lot of your information in there. And it's like if you lose your hard drive, if you lose that memory on your computer, it's almost like you've lost your memory. It's like you've lost your mind. But as the user of the computer, you are not the computer. It's like almost an expansion of your mind. The same as language. Language isn't... your mind doesn't speak in language. It uses language to communicate with the outside world, but the mind has its own kind of language, its own kind of operating system. Now, if you can figure out how the mind works at its root, it's at its base, whether it's a binary mind or whether it's trinary or whether it's an totally different organic kind of system, the mind is like kind of a hardware, So the system that's out there, including history, language, mathematics and everything, gets put into our minds. And it's like having a computer. You're running your computer now, so you can't fix it while you're running it. It's very difficult for a system to observe itself. So it becomes very difficult for us to think in a different context when we are the context of our thoughts. So how can this game, this word game, be created and run in society without computers? It can be passed down through scriptures, it can be passed down through teachings, through doctrines, and given to us. But there has to be certain parts about that game where the clues are hidden. Like, for example, the key is in the box. But not everybody can know that the key is in the box. So the game has to kind of encrypt itself so that no one can hack in and just read the instructions from later on in the game. There has to be a kind of encryption. So that encryption has to be, if you could think about breaking the languages to pieces. All the different world languages, different wisdoms, it's like getting a weapon, like a gun, and taking the different pieces of that gun and giving them to the different nations. And as long as those nations are at war with each other, that weapon will never be complete. Now, if that's not even a weapon, but actually a powerful energy resource that's for the good and bad, depending on how we learn to use it. So this power, whatever this power is been segmented around the world, around in communication and encrypted in that way. We know that time and evolution pushes man up or down, in consciousness, and it forces change. And so the legislation, so the words, this realm of script, computer script, like natural human software or mindware, let's call it mindware, mind software, it has to progress through time, just like the game. As you get to the next level, it has to then open up certain more options, and so there must be people in place in society now that are pretty much at the root programming of this game. But at the same time, they also can't know the fully workings of the game, because if one of them told the game, then the whole game would just be ruined for everybody, on the whole of mankind, you know. So the game must be so well protected, that fundamental encryption towards how the game is played has to be so cleverly encrypted that, you know, you couldn't even say it by accident. So there will be people, and maybe we all play a role in this game. I'm sure we all play a role in this game. We're all kind of pushing this game. And as we see in the media, there's a lot of signs and symbols and logos. And maybe there are people who know more about this game than we. But they're also in a danger, because maybe they think that they know it all, and they're the ones with the key information, and they have now cracked the game, and they're now playing everybody else, when they're actually just become a higher mechanism with within that game. For example, if you wanted to be a policeman in order to gain power over other people, you could do that, but then at the same time you would limit your own powers, because you're getting your power from a higher force. You see what I mean? So that's how the game is structured, and all the civil servants, bureaucrats, all of the legal systems and social systems, school systems, church systems, all run on this kind of passed down paper structure of words, of script, like a program, like software. So this script, really, if it's so divine, if it's so wonderful, and if it's so good for mankind, and not evil, good, then it should provide an option for those who are really good at heart, those who are true in the soul, those who have a clear, logical mind that doesn't presume good or evil, those who have like a spirit to encourage others. You know, those types of people should be able to find a particular key within the game that empowers that kind of person to solve a lot of the problems on an individual level and a collective level. Because when we gain wisdom, even though we can't pass it on because it's just inconceivable to others, you know, a lot of secrets are not really secret, they're just inconceivable to other people. You know, as soon as we become wise enough to actually not lead each other's, but like offer that leadership, you know, so that others can follow, you know. So if I'm a mountain climber, I'm happy if others want to follow my paths, and I'll help people. But I'm not, you know, as an anarchist, you know, I don't call myself an anarchist, but if you're an anarchist, there's no reason why you can't let others follow your example. You know, and you're not exactly being a ruler. You're kind of leading a way, but you're not leading others astray, you know. So that's kind of a position, I feel, when we become empowered by the wisdoms that's opened up within this game. Say, you know, we've seen a sign on the wall. We've seen a sign that's been left down within our language, or within several languages coming together. And we've seen the answer, or a riddle has opened up, but we're still not sure of the answer. You know, but as soon as that answer comes, it gives us a totally different view of life, and then we can start to help others more, without having to try and pass that answer across to them, to actually harness the power that we have, you know. Our ability to build better homes, and build better gardens, and better food forests, and better school systems, to not even have school systems but houses of learning for people of all ages, open all the time. You know, houses of healing that are there for people to really heal in all regards, you know. These are the types of powers that I'd like to access. It seems like the government, you know, they've kind of taken all of the credit for everything, you know, in our psyches. You know, we've built a lot of things, but in order for those things to run together properly, like hardware and software, there's a kernel being built called government, and it administrates it. Back to computer programming, for those of you who know about computers and different systems, we have the system Linux. But even in the system of Linux, there's a dispute, because originally there was a lot of little programs called GNU software and other types of software that were all to do with free software, open source and free, license free. And so these pieces of software, GNU, were all running, but there was nothing connecting them all. No central system to make it easy for the user to do this, that and the other at one time. So Linus Torvald came along, and he was, other people were interested in graphics programs, other people were interested in sound, other people were interested in printing and word text processing, and Linus or whatever, he was interested in building this kernel, this central administration thing. And it's only a small part of the system, really, but it links everything else together. Now, the fact that it's only sort of like a very small percent of that whole computer system, it's been argued that it shouldn't be called Linux, it should be called GNU Linux or GNU systems. But there again, it's like the same as the government. They come in, they build the kernel, they build the central operating system, and take the credits for everything else. Now we need to be able to take that power back. We need to be able to operate that system as individuals and as groups, without having to go to this, to this boss, to this nanny, this mother and father state that we've built, who build the rules and just seem to ignore our divinity as human beings. But like I say, this is what I've been looking for in the system, in the paper system. Turn the world around, and the trick reveals itself to a certain degree, because you can see, what is it? What is it that something's saying to me that I'm then switching round by accident? When reading a book, how about reading it as if you wrote it for others to read? But when you read the word I or me, that it's you that wrote those words. Or how about the fact when you read a book like Lord of the Rings, to understand that there's one author behind all of those characters, that there's one author who has an intent for each of those characters to have their own fictional intent, and that you, as the reader, can take all of those characters as yourself. So you're reading a book from one author, taking 100 characters or millions of characters and putting them back into yourself, seeing yourself as the characters in that book, because the author also saw him or herself in them characters. And so surely the way of actually understanding the script that we're reading, we have to understand the intent of the author and not switch it round as if we're being spoken to, but maybe it's us who are standing behind the words that are being said. Have a think about that, how we read different things and put them into our own context, and how we can interpret them in different ways, and who's to say which way is the right way. Okay, yeah, have a good think about that, have a nice time, and enjoy the ride. Cheerio.